My dad is a Lutheran pastor, and most of my growing up years were.
Isn't everybody in Minnesota a Lutheran?
It's almost.
Yeah.
Several people here are, I know, or certainly have deep connections with Lutheran Church. I was, my earliest indications of becoming a hippie were being, I was forced to go to church on Sunday. But I found the far corner of the balcony, which was as far as I could get to being, as close as I get to being out and not being in full rebellion with my father. So I basically spent my childhood sort of as a typical pastor's kid, which generally do not have good reputations for a good reason. I had a family that had a great degree of honor for education, and I was a C+ student. And when you have to say plus to add to C, you know how bad it is. I went to Washburn High School, which is in South Minneapolis. Washburn was always proud because 91% of their kids went to college. And my high school guidance counselor told me I was one of the people that should not go to college. So I was kind of the family failure, pretty much sure that there was a lot of reason for that. And was lucky enough to kind of get a college to accept me. It's a school in northern Iowa called Waldorf, and was able to get into college barely. But I really had no idea what to do with my life, no real picture of any particular sort of career path. And this is the late 60s, so the hippie thing is coming up, and there's a lot of rebellion. And so I basically was, that I would ever be speaking to anybody certainly about faith, let alone have any kind of successful career, was not in my dream set. I wound up getting out of college, did better in college, graduated from the University of Denver, and I still had no idea what to do with my life. And so to please my father, I went to seminary, which I do not recommend as a choice for most people. And went to Luther Seminary, what is now Luther Seminary. Dallon's been on the board for years. And what was Northwestern then is now part of Luther Seminary in St. Paul. And I stayed there for about a year. And I stayed there until I ran into a homiletics professor. And this guy was very clear and impressive. And what he said is, what he conveyed is, if you take on the responsibility of pursuing this is a serious choice. And there's accountability to the people you talk to. And on top of that, not a lot of people are able to do it well. And you are really lucky if you have one good sermon in you. And I listened to this guy, and he's right. And I quit immediately the seminary. So I have no idea what to do with my life. My poor wife is reasonably successful, so we're not starving. Otherwise, we would have been. And I decide, well, if I could get paid and listen to music at the same time, it would be heaven. So I go to the place I bought my college stereo, which is a little company called Sound of Music, and I apply for a job as a salesman. And I couldn't believe it. They hired me as a salesman. I'd never sold anything in my life. And I go into this store in West St. Paul to sell stereos, which I should be able to do because I love music, I love stereos. And you're kind of a hippy-dippy kind of guy. No kidding. Yeah. And it was a hippy-dippy kind of era. So I figured I can't fail at this. Well, I was wrong. In my first 2 weeks of working about 120 hours, I made $69. Because it was paid on commission. So you got paid what you were worth. And I was worth $69, about 50 cents an hour. So I went in to quit, and they told me I couldn't quit. So, because I presume it's at 50 cents an hour, they couldn't replace me. So, anyway, so I had to at least stay for another 2 weeks. And it was so insanely frustrating that I was such a failure at it. I thought, I got to sell something. So I came up with a strategy that I would, if I did more for a customer than anybody in their right mind would, maybe somebody would buy from me. So my very first sale was a set of speakers to a guy in Red Wing shoes in Red Wing, Minnesota. I delivered the speakers and installed them in his home. So I made less than 50 cents an hour in relationship to this and had travel costs. But it was the first transaction sale, and it was sort of like a light bulb went on. Oh, that's what this selling is about. You actually deliver more value to the customer than a competitor does. And if you can do that effectively, you actually can do something of value. And I went from being unable to selling to competing for being the top salesperson in the company like that. This I would describe as pretty much of a miracle. What happened for me was Best Buy was founded in '66 as an audio specialty store chain. I started in '73 as a salesperson. By 1970, the company was founded in '66. It made its first dollar of profit in 1977. So it'll tell you something about Dick Schultz, the founder, in terms of how aggressive either ignorant of the facts or aggressive he was in relationship to commitment to developing a successful business. In 1978 and 1979, the company lost $200,000 each year on $4 million a year in sales. So we were effectively bankrupt. Dick came out, I thought, to fire me, and instead he was looking for replacing the management team, and he had 3 of the people he was looking at to do it had worked for me in the store. And I got mad because I thought he should be able to, if he's talking to 3 people that used to work for me, maybe he should talk to me. So completely out of character. And this is as a long-haired hippie. Mm-hmm. So Dick is for some of you probably know him because he lives down here. Dick is as buttoned down a human being as you get, and I was not and am not. But I said, look, if you're talking 3 people who work for me, you're missing it. You should pick me. I can do it. I had no idea what I was talking about and no idea in relationship to doing it. And he looked shocked, but came back after a few days, thought about it, and he divided the job and gave me an opportunity to come in and be a leader. Well, essentially what I had was that I was of economic value and I didn't know it, which is I'd spent 7 years in a store serving a community of customers in a particular industry. That's all I had. No business experience, but I had that experience. And we used that experience to basically come up with strategies that were essentially based on not dissimilar from what I told you the first story. How are we going to serve our customers in a better way than somebody else does? And how are we going to inspire people to go ahead and do that? And that we were able to very quickly go from losing money to making a little bit of money. And then we became Best Buy in 1984, essentially because copying the big superstores which were starting to emerge at that period of time. But there was most of my business history wasn't like trying to build a big $50 billion success story. It was trying to have the company stay alive into the next future or next point.
So here you're in a key job, but you're not the founder.
Right.
You are the right-hand man to Dick Schultz. And what was Dick Schultz's disposition toward your attitude in this regard, and how did you guys work it out? Because you obviously worked very closely for many years and still do.
Well, Dick's my polar opposite. I said I have a terrible time getting to faith. Dick is faith. I mean, he, at the core, we share the same faith. How it's realized in the world, probably we almost always disagree. We're constantly, for Dick, I see the murk and he sees the clarity. And so I think we were kind of great counterparts for each other. Probably still are to an extent. That Dick could see the 100. We couldn't see the 100 or the $50 billion company out of it, but Dick was sort of fearless about seeing an opportunity for growth, and sort of with a minute he had the faith it was going to happen, he believed it already happened.
Right.
So that sort of put the pressure on those of us operating the business to try to realize his dream. I think the core of the enterprise was always the person you talk to at Best Buy. If you're in an industry in which you constantly have to reinvent yourself, it means you've got to be actually following where the customer is going. Well, Best Buy, because it has more transactions with customers than any other consumer electronics company in the world, has an inherent advantage in that space. because there's more dialogue between people who work for Best Buy and the customers than there is in any other company in the world. It quit using it. And two things happened when it quit using it. One of which was that if you're the employee doing in that engaged interchange and you know you can't affect what happens next, you're less engaged. And that was measurably there in terms of employee engagement. And if you're the customer and you're dealing with somebody who's less engaged, you know it. On top of that, there's no way for the insight that you've got, and when you're talking to the customer, for what that customer is talking to you about, the issues they're facing, to get to the top where the decisions are made. And the fact that decisions were moved to the top. And those two things really fundamentally crushed the reason for the company to exist.
Let's say your people had stayed hyper engaged on the floor. But meanwhile, there's a couple of 900-pound gorillas knocking on the door.
Yes.
Amazon and Apple.
Yes.
The Apple stores. Strikes me, you could be engaged to the ends of the earth, and these guys are going to roll over you.
I disagree.
Okay.
Profoundly disagree. The most successful of those two, and the only one really making money in the consumer electronics industry and making a lot, is Apple. And Apple did the most eccentric thing you could ever do as a manufacturer. It did it by opening retail stores and touching customers directly. That particular, and they're doing it in a way that's better than what Best Buy is able to do for its customers. That's not because Best Buy couldn't. It's because it didn't know how to and didn't. And that is not, I don't in any way, shape, or form say that if you believe in the premises I believe, that you're going to get it right all the time. You're not. And the companies can fail and do, but you will be able to look at the company and see that the company is desperately pursuing its customers' interest at the time in which it starts to fail. I don't think that's true of Best Buy right now. I think, hasn't been true of Best Buy, and hopefully will be true in the future, but it has not been true of Best Buy, that you look at it and say it's desperately trying to do better than Apple is with its customers, or it's desperately trying to do something that Amazon cannot do for its customers. That I'm not clear what those things are, and that part of what you need is, again, if 180,000 people working there are unique individuals bringing some great individual capacity to the game that could be inspired to do that, you've got this huge army that you can use to tackle either of those problems. Mm-hmm. And I think the future challenge for Best Buy is to enlist that army with clarity in terms of what it's going to do for its customers that neither Amazon or Apple are able to do today. No strategy for any business is impermeable. And no strategy is infinite. And if you deliver something really well, the customer is looking for what's next. So Apple has raised the bar. I think Apple's the first 21st century retailer. And the reason that they can put a genius bar up and not have all of us laugh at it is that there is a backbone behind that genius. They have empowered their employees to do more than other people have. And there is the cloud, this stuff you hear about in terms of big data, the cloud, that's all sitting behind each of those employees. Those employees have a connection to a database, which is informed by what they're doing in the store, that allows them to serve customers massively better than anybody's ever done before. Well, that is one huge invitation to anybody that serves customers. And so, for me, for instance, look at what's Best Buy doing in that front. Well, if it's not competitive, and it isn't, then there's an opportunity to, we don't know how the customer would respond if you were competitive, and maybe better. But the fact that your competitor has done something wonderful for the customers, which is what I would describe that as. And then you look at, he's talking about Steve Jobs, because I do think Apple is a religion. I don't think it's Christianity, but it's a religion. And Steve Jobs was a prophet. I got to know him. Steve Jobs was an authentic zealot for a point of view that was inspiring and is inspiring to people even after he's gone. That's a powerful part of what our economy needs. It's a powerful part of what employees need inside an organization, and it gives them an authentic sense of mission. Mm-hmm. So part of the reason at the edge of that can be arrogance and some other things. But there is an authentic sense of mission there, which is why they've done more than anybody else has.
Okay.